Well, hello everybody. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati, Hamilton County, and I'm interviewing Ray Wissel, Cincinnati, a resident of Westwood on the west side of town, and it is the 15th of February 2007. We're at the main library, and our camera operator today is Dennis Daly, who we give thanks to for being a producer of this program and a very capable leader. Ray, where were you born?
In Fairmount.
In Fairmount, Cincinnati.
Right at the end of the Western Hills Viaduct.
Oh, sure.
It runs into Harrison Avenue.
Where did you go elementary school?
St. Bonaventures.
St. Bonaventure, still there? North side?
No, not now. They just tore it down a few years ago.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that.
Well, yeah, they did. They
Yeah.
tore it down. They took the church out. But from there, I moved to Mount Adams when I was 10 years old.
Oh, you lived on Mount Adams. How we done?
And then, strangely, I went to Immaculate Conception School, which also closed later on.
Yes.
But the church up there, of course, is still there, Immaculate Church.
One beautiful
and
church.
one of the stained glass window from the front of St. Bonaventure's Church, when they tore it down, they took it up to Mount Adams. They wanted it, and they mounted it in the front of the Immaculata Church in Mount Adams.
That's a beautiful church, and of course that is so historical.
Oh, yeah.
I think it dates from 1863, something like that.
Right.
And it's been featured, of course, being on the promontory there of Mount Adams, so prominent, and an icon of Cincinnati. It's a great place. And well, let's go back a little bit. Now, you lived in Fairmount, and was your family in business, or what?
Oh, yes. We were in a newspaper selling business.
Newspaper selling business.
Yeah, my brothers and I had 3 brothers and a sister, and my oldest brother was what they call a supply boy.
Uh-huh.
The papers would be delivered, they would throw them off the truck.
Sure.
He would cut the bundle open and distribute so much to each boy who was selling papers. Of course, we kind of had it wrapped up with our 3 brothers selling the papers, and then he stayed there and he sold papers as the cars came off the viaduct.
Wasn't that so?
This is going back to 1936.
Oh, yes.
And so we each took a corner there down around where Harrison, Queen City Avenue cross.
Of course.
We sold there. And so one of us would get traffic going one way and one would catch traffic. Because what would happen is cars would come by, and every time they stoplight, then we'd run out to the cars and give them their paper, sell it to them for.
Well, you must have sold some pretty big headlines in those days, too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they would have extras out when there was the big headlines. And, well, unfortunately, one of the extras was about one of my brothers who sold papers with us. It was between editions, and he took his bicycle, and he told my other brother, oldest brother, he was going to ride over the viaduct, and he'd be back in time for the next edition. We rode over the viaduct, and on the way back on the lower deck, he was killed by, we don't know exactly how it happened. He was on his bike. We think his bike tire caught in a railroad, or not, a streetcar line. He was thrown off the bike and hit by a Standard Oil truck.
Oh, how old was he?
He was 16.
Oh, how tragic.
1936, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
we just moved to Mount Adams a couple months before that.
I'll be darned. Mount Adams in those days was interesting territory, too, with the Germans and the Irish up there.
Germans and Irish. We went to the German school, the Irish went to the Irish school.
Sure.
Everybody from Mount Adams married somebody else from Mount Adams, so you had to be careful who you talk about because they were all related.
All related. A crossing of lines, too. Isn't that interesting? Yes, I've studied the history, and that is. So then, high school. How about high school?
High school, we were very, very poor in those days. As you know,
depth of the Depression.
Oh yeah, it's right. Well, go back to Mount Adams, one of my favorite stories is my brothers and I, we stole coal off of moving coal trains going in, about right in back of our backyard was the railroad tracks. There were 7 or 8 tracks back there. And coal trains would come through every night. Well, they had to slow down because over Grand Avenue was what you call a trestle.
Crossing.
And you have to slow down going over those. So when they would slow down, my next oldest brother and I, we would hop onto the train, crawl up. It was still moving. We'd crawl up on the car and start throwing coal off.
Oh my God.
Because we had no money to buy coal for the winter. And then my 2 oldest brothers, they would come along with bushel baskets and put the coal in that and carry it back into our yard, and refill 2 or 3 baskets a night, whatever we could. And everybody else was doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, that was common practice.
The railroad had detectives, but they didn't bother.
They didn't pursue that sort of thing, no.
They knew our conditions, and they said, well, the railroad's got a lot more money than they have, so.
Oh, of course. Well, in those days, there were so many things, There was a community spirit, wasn't there, among families and neighborhoods and tradesmen and so forth that understood this sort of thing.
I'll tell you another offshoot of that Depression era that didn't show up until the war in Italy. After we were on the lines for about 3 or 4 months, they finally put us in reserve, and they took every division in Italy and pulled them back to a safe area, and they made us shoot all of our weapons over again. Shoot a pistol, rifle, BAR, light machine gun, everything. And they said, you've got to learn to fire more shells. They said, we aren't using up any of our ammunition. And got to thinking, I traced that back. I don't know whether they do, but I attribute that to the Depression. We didn't waste anything in the Depression.
Right.
And all the other people went through it too. So when you fought in World War II, you didn't just shoot to be shooting. You had to shoot at something, And that was a mistake. They said, don't worry about whether you're going to hit them or not. Just you fire enough times, you'll hit them. Somebody, So they said, use more ammunition. You've got to keep shooting rather than just wait for a target all the time.
Absolutely. Well, that is so, and it's difficult for following generations to understand things like that, not having experienced it particularly. So there you were on Mount Adams, and you finished elementary school at Immaculate.
Right, Conception.
And then you went to
Commercial Vocational High School, which was a 2-year vocational school. We had in Cincinnati about 6 or 7 vocational schools.
I see.
They had a 2-year curriculum, and that you would go for 2 years and then graduate, and then they would help you try to find a job.
Sure.
Of course, being in a commercial field, we learned typing and bookkeeping and things like that, so they would help us find a job in that area. My brother went to electrical school. Another brother went to commercial like I did, and there was different mechanical, electrical, vocational sewing for the girls, and so forth, where you learned a trade. We call them trade schools.
Trade schools, yeah.
So then I went to work at Kahn's Meatpacking Company.
Oh, yes.
In
Is this down on Spring Grove?
On Spring Road. The only place I ever worked in my life.
Really?
I started when I was 16 years old as a mail boy, which was the lowest position in the office, and I retired at 60. 44 years later, I retired at the age of 61 as the second highest man in the company. So you can see that there was plenty of opportunity to.
I should say. Well, that in itself is a whole story, being in a historic outfit like that.
Yeah.
So you were born in 26?
25.
25.
June.
Okay. So there, the war started, what do you say, roughly 42. What was your feeling at the time? Were you aware of what was going on in the East and so
Well,
forth?
see, one of the things, when I was a kid on Mount Adams, me and another fellow, we built model airplanes.
Oh, yeah.
All the model airplanes.
Very good.
I was very familiar with airplanes and
Yes.
so forth, and I wanted to get into the fighting. Everywhere I wanted to go.
Oh,
He couldn't wait to get there.
That's
So
right.
you got there, you couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah, right.
But being familiar with those, I thought about the Air Corps. But I didn't think I had enough education for that. But my brother, oldest brother, joined the Marines. So I went down as soon as I was near 18 to join the Marines. They examined me, said, "You've got a heart murmur, we can't take you." Okay, so I walked across the street downtown to the Army recruiting station. Didn't tell them what the Marines had said. They examined me. "Fine, you're in."
Yeah.
But to this day, I have a heart murmur.
And you look wonderful. You're surviving very well, particularly all you went through.
Right.
Where did you go for your first training?
To Camp Croix, South Carolina.
Camp Croix.
Yeah.
I'll be done.
There was a program going on that I didn't know about when I enlisted, actually, of course.
Mhm.
And we were sent, it was called ASTP, Army
Yes.
Specialized Training Program.
Right.
And I didn't know how I got into it or anything. You know, when you went in, you took the thing called a General Classification Test. That was apparently designed to test your intelligence. Anyway, I found out after basic training that people who were put into this ASTP program, if they had a score on that test of 115 or more, if you had 110, you could go to Officers Candidate School.
Right.
If you had 115 or more, you could go to this ASTP program, which was designed to kind of save the people who were in it. Most of them who came in there, incidentally, I scored 121, and that's why I got thrown in there, because it was over 115. But most of the fellows we met right away, and many of them had started college and were interrupted, and others were thinking about going to college, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to know this. They test every day when we came in from basic training. Instead of going into our barracks and maybe laying down to rest, they marched us into a dining hall.
Mm-hmm.
With all the tables were set out with tests for us to take. And we took those tests every day almost. And then because they wanted to get an idea how well you could do under pressure. They figured that if you were sitting down all your life and they gave you a test, that was one thing. But if you came in off of a 20-mile hike and you were sweated and dead tired, could you think all right under those circumstances? So anyway, but at the result, at the end of that 13 weeks of training, these guys were sent all over the country to different colleges, depending on what profession they showed an inkling for. And of course, I showed none. And some of the other guys showed. The guy said to me, he couldn't even figure out why I was there. And I said, well, I don't know either. So then he looked at me, oh, I see, you scored 121 on your AGT test or whatever. Yeah. And he said, you need 110 to get into Officers Candidate School, 115 to get into this program. Well, you would think that if you didn't qualify for this program, you would drop down to the next category, which would have been Officers Candidate School, and they would send you to one of those. But no, they needed infantry replacement someplace. So they go from the people whose lives they were trying to preserve to the place where most of the lives were lost. And, but anyway, 70 of us went to, 35 of us went to Fort Sam Houston to join the 88th Division. The other 35, I don't even know where they went. I'm sure they did similar things. When we got to Fort Sam, they were calling out the people who were 42 years of age. They didn't want to send anybody except officers, high officers, overseas if they were over 42 years of age, and because of the rigors of the war. So we replaced those people.
I see. Well, tell me about your family. You had three brothers?
Three brothers and a sister.
3 brothers and a sister. what was the feeling in your family, your parents, your mom, your dad?
Well, my oldest brother had a hernia, and they couldn't take him.
Okay.
It was medically unacceptable. My second oldest brother was killed.
Yes.
My brother next to me was had joined the Marines previously, and as I say, I tried to join them too. But so I enlisted. There wasn't. I think the parents just kind of accepted it.
They did.
By that time, anyway. And
well, you know that you brought up a good point there, because that was the pervading philosophy of that era.
Right.
We knew we had this terrible thing confronting us,
Oh, yeah.
and we had to do it, and we were dedicated. Everyone was dedicated to the country.
Everyone.
Yes. Well, was any of your family, your sister or your parents, involved in war production or anything like that?
No, my sister worked for McKesson Drug Company.
Oh yeah.
Down here in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest brother had opened a small, what they called it in those days, a confectionery, which was like a candy store.
Sure.
With some money that he had saved from selling papers, you know. And he opened that in Mount Adams, and we moved up there.
Oh yeah.
But then, as I say, the rest of us, my other two brothers, we ended up in the service.
Right.
Strangely enough, he handled the Pacific. I
You were balancing the world there, weren't you?
Right.
Okay, then, so
I don't think that in this day, these students or people who are learning about the war, I think the thing you really have to impress on them is that this was truly a world war.
Yes.
I mean, they called it World War I, but it was by no means a world war.
No.
I got a map out at home of showing where all different things took place in World War II, and there's hardly a spot on that map that something in World War II didn't happen. You go down to a place like South America and you say, did they fight in the South? Oh no, they never knew anything about the war in South America. German pocket battleship Guerre was sunk in the harbor of Montevideo or Uruguay.
Right, exactly.
They tasted the war there.
Yes.
I mean, every place, Alaska, all over.
Oh, yeah.
We had troops in Italy from almost every country you can think of.
Yeah.
We had American, we had Canadian, we had British, we had Australian, we had New Zealanders, we had a Japanese regiment.
Yeah,
in
Nisei.
Yeah, we had them. They were the most decorated group and all.
423rd.
Yeah, we had goons from Africa.
Yeah.
They were a trip. They went into battle with that scimitar, you know, that
Just imagine.
long handles, the long-bladed sword. And
They could instill fear in the enemy, couldn't they?
they instilled fear in us. I tell you, when they came into the line right before our first offensive, they called us all back and passed the word along. If you're in your foxhole and somebody comes up and puts their hand, and you wouldn't hear them because they crawl on the ground, puts their hand over your mouth and pulls your head back, and with the other hand feels your helmet, don't move, don't resist, especially. Don't move, it's a goon. When he feels your helmet, he knows what the American and British helmets are like. He'll just quietly remove himself and crawl forward.
Oh.
If you resist, he's going to slice you through
Sure.
with his thing. So,
That's
fortunately, we weren't around them too much.
yeah, and you were well forewarned. That's interesting. Now you said how many of you were sent across on the ships? You said 550 ships?
550 ships in our convoy.
In that convoy?
Yeah, we left Norfolk, assembled outside.
Now this was 44?
43.
43.
November of 43.
Okay, and
No,
you...
December 43, December
Okay.
3rd.
And you headed for, what was your...
We didn't know where we were going.
You didn't know where you were going?
You had to black out all insignia before you left Fort Sam Houston.
Right.
On the way to Norfolk. You
No
black out
identification.
all insignia, take all patches off, all the trucks and vehicles that had your regiment and division painted on it, all had to be blacked out.
Yes.
We stayed in Norfolk for 2 weeks before we shipped out. They used us as longshoremen to help load the ships at that time. We were not allowed to even make a telephone call. from there because they didn't want Germans supposedly to know who was coming over and so forth, where they were going. This worked fine all the way till we got to Italy. The night we landed in Naples, the Axis Sally came on the radio that night and said, "Welcome to the 88th Division."
Oh, yes.
They had their spy system.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah,
something?
she knew the minute we landed.
Yeah. So, did you land in Casablanca first? And
Yes.
then?
Yeah. We followed the coast all the way down the coast of North America, through the canal zones, down to Brazil. Brazil sticks out in a point at Natal, N-A-T-A-L. That is the closest point between Africa and South America.
Right.
1,500 miles, I think it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, when we got there, we didn't even know where we were. This all knowledge that came to light later on. We turned directly left and headed as fast as possible, which was probably 10 miles. These were Liberty ships. We were all loaded on Liberty ships.
Right.
No transports, because transports went out of New York and those ports into England. They went as fast as they could. They could go a lot faster than our Liberty ships. But we had 500 ships. We had one of your escort carriers with us. We had a couple of cruisers and a number of destroyers. And each day, everybody in the convoy, and this covered miles and miles of ocean, shifted positions so that if there was a submarine following any certain ship, that they would be confused. We heard depth charges go off from time to time, but not really near us. Of course, they would pick on the ships at the outside of the convoy. That's one of the other reasons that they shifted over.
And then you had armed guard aboard, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Navy armed guard that would man the guns.
Just a few. They had
right.
one gun in the front and one in the back.
Yeah.
And they had each of those ships had 500 troops on it.
500.
They had rigged them up in the holds with bunks or five.
Tiers and tiers of them.
Yeah. Well, you know what those things look like. If you weren't careful, you rolled out of them. But there would be 500 of us in the hold, and each ship carried 500. So, and they didn't all, maybe weren't all our division. I don't know how many men, but our entire division went over in that convoy.
Right.
We landed in Casablanca on December 3rd. Somebody told us we were in Casablanca, but all I know is these big black African fellows came over, and we'd go down off the ship with our bag, barracks bag, which weighed about 100 pounds at that time. Everything you owned in the world was in that bag. At the top of the gangplank, somebody loaded it on your shoulder.
Sure.
You ran down because you couldn't stop from the weight. When you got off there, you dropped it on the bottom. There was a truck there, and one of these big black, when I'm talking about big, I'm talking about guys like Shaquille O'Neal and people like that. They just took these bags like that, just threw them up. And we could hardly lift them off the ground. They just threw them up on the trucks. It started out we didn't know where we were going. We went through the mountains. I found out there was mountains in Africa for the first time in my life, and I was a good geography student too. But anyway, my idea was Africa was extreme heat. You know, you wore a bathing suit all the time or whatever you had, and you sweated all day long. But anyway, we started up these mountains in 40 and 8 trains that were left there from World War I, from France, and they moved them down to their colonies and the British colonies. And we traveled. Am I taking too much time on this part of it?
No, this is wonderful.
Okay. We traveled for about 3 days on these things. Chug. It was. You've heard the song, I Think I Can, I Think You Can.
Yeah.
A little engine that could, but we had our doubts that they'd ever make it up some of these hills. You know, they were coal fire things.
Right.
So anyway, we got up in those mountains during the day, got off the trains, went out into the fields where we had pyramidal tents, would sleep 8 people on cots and on the floor, and on the ground, I should say. The officers got the cots, we got the ground. And so anyway, there were 8 of us in the tent. We go to sleep that night, it's getting a little cool. The next morning we woke up, there was an icicle between you and the ground, between your nose and the ground. And they told us keep plenty of blankets over you, all you can get. And I said, what in the hell is going on? This is Africa, it can't be this cold. So the bugle sounded and everybody went out.
Not what you expected.
Oh, no. So it was cold. We went to breakfast, you took your mess kit and went through a chow line. The guy threw a couple fried eggs on there, a couple pieces of bacon, and he went over to, and some bread or biscuits. He went over to sit down on the ground, put your mess kit on the ground, sat down. When you picked up your mess kit, the grease had frozen white, turned white. If I were back in the States, I wouldn't eat it.
No, of course not.
That's all I'm going to get for breakfast.
That's it.
And some mornings we had pancakes, but
well, now when you did embarked from Casablanca, then you went across to Naples. Is that the idea?
Actually, we were in Casablanca, which is in Morocco.
Yes.
Next to Morocco is Algeria on the Mediterranean Sea. Well, when we finished there, we stayed there about we got there on December 24th, and we stayed there for training until February 12th.
Okay.
And then we went by truck down to Oran, which is in Algeria, on the Mediterranean coast. In the port of Oran, they put us on Liberty ships again. These were British Liberty ships.
Oh.
And they took us, they were supplied by the United States.
Right, of course.
But they were a lot different than the ships we went over. The ships we went over on were spotless. I mean, they were under Navy command, they were spotless. When we went from Oran to Naples, we couldn't wait to get off their ships. They were, British didn't take care of them all. They just rotted, you know. And so it took 7 days from Oran to Naples across the Mediterranean. But Mediterranean is like a pool table top compared to the Atlantic, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm telling a Navy man.
Well,
but,
yeah, it's an inland sea, it's what it is.
Inland sea, right. Unless there's a storm, there are hardly any waves of any consequence. But we got off the ships at Naples, and then we put on trucks again to a staging area where they assembled the whole division.
So this would be in February of 44.
44, right.
Okay, and by that time, Anzio had been secured.
Yeah.
And
the line had stopped. The fighting line had stopped that previous winter.
Yes.
They got as far as Casino. There were a number of attacks on Casino, but they couldn't take Casino.
Terrible place.
The other side, the lower side of Casino, there was a river called the Volturno River.
Yes.
And they said that river ran
yes.
red with American blood as they were trying to advance because the Germans didn't want to go any further. The landings, original landings were in Sicily. They conquered Sicily, then they landed in southern Italy, and then started pushing up from there.
Right. Now, did you get orders? Did you know what your destination was to be on land?
No. You never knew anything from one day to the next.
Yeah.
You know. We stayed there and took additional training. I went to school to, somebody asked me, did I learn anything in the Army? I said, oh yes, I have a degree in mule packing.
Mule packing?
I was at mule packing school. But in the mountains of Italy, you couldn't, I mean, you walked, but you couldn't carry much. You know?
Right.
And they chose mules because horses were stronger, could carry more, but they couldn't negotiate in the mountains.
Mules were sure-footed.
Mules were sure-footed animals, and you could put quite a bit of weight on them.
Right.
But you had to pack them just right. And that's what we had to do, learn in mule packing. So we had to learn how to pack mortar shells, how to pack machine gun and rifle bullets.
Right, balance things.
Everything had to be balanced in certain ways. You tied knots and everything on them. And that's what we learned in mule packing school. Then after I finished that, I was sent to mine school.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a school owned by, or put on by the French, there was a French general, not general, a French officer who was an expert on German mines.
Oh, yes.
And he made it his business to be. So he taught all the people, anybody who was going to be involved in mine sweeping. Well, by that time I had been assigned to the, what they call the A&P platoon of our, each infantry division has 3 regiments. Each regiment has 3 battalions. Each battalion has 5 companies. They have a headquarters company, 3 line companies, and a heavy weapons company. The heavy weapons company is your light mortars and your light machine guns. They're called heavy weapons. The A&P platoon is called ammunition and pioneer. The ammunition part is your job is to keep everybody up firing on the front line supplied with ammunition, no matter what the conditions are. If it's raining shells, you've got to deliver the ammunition. They need it. The pioneering part is sweeping mines, neutralizing booby traps, doing any kind of explosive work like shells that didn't explode, landing somewhere where they couldn't let them there, and doing that sort of thing. Learning to blow up anything there was to be blown up. So you learn, well, in Africa we had trained to do all the blowing up part of it.
Yeah.
In Italy, when we went to mine school, they taught us how to disarm all these German mines.
Right. Now, where did you first, did you see the enemy? Were you up against them face to face?
Exactly. Well, when you're sweeping mines, you are in front of
Right.
everybody else.
Right.
The hills in Italy, you come down like this and it goes up like this. There are
You're up
mines,
there.
all this area in between. Our divisions are lined up here, German areas are here. All these valleys in between are lined with mines.
Yes.
See, as they retreated, they laid mines well ahead of time.
Yeah.
They knew that they had 3 defense lines, as you can see on that map there.
Right.
And those lines were heavily fortified. Everything was zeroed in by their artillery, and they were set up to stop us at that point, to stop the attacking forces at that point.
Right.
Which they did. Now, when they got to that line at the casino there, the troops failed to conquer, to take casino in the fall and the winter, so they thought they'd wait till the spring when they got reinforcements, and they would then be able to start a new offensive. Now, during all that period of time, the offensive was scheduled to start May the 11th. We didn't know it at the time, but it was they picked May the 11th. The weather people had said that on the night of May the 11th, at 11 o'clock at night, the moon will come out.
Oh, yes.
Damn if it didn't.
Yeah.
At 11 o'clock on the night of May the 11th, the moon came out.
How about that?
And they wanted that to help illuminate the battlefield
Right.
because 2 of the divisions were brand new.
This was rough country down here.
Oh, it's all mountains, yeah.
It's all mountains, foothills.
That's where they put their lines.
Yeah.
Along the mountains.
Right.
Down here, over there, up here.
Now, I see they've got on here the Hitler line in 1944. Then the Siegfried line was farther north.
No, Siegfried, the Gustav line.
Oh, the Gustav line. That's it.
Another German.
Right,
And,
right.
These 2 lines, and then this line up here was the Gothic line.
Gothic line.
Hitler's Berchtesgaden is up here.
Yes.
In Germany. There's a runner pass.
Yeah.
Berchtesgaden is near there. Germany, or Hitler thought that certainly these mountains, if these mountains didn't stop us, these certainly would.
I should say those were monumental mountains. That's right. Well, and of course, being a foot soldier, you had to traverse this rough country. And how about your equipment now? You talked about your boots and so forth. You wore out a pair of boots.
Yeah, we were down here. The offensive started here's that Volturno.
Yes, there's Volturno.
Up here is there's Casino.
Yeah.
Over here near the coast is a town called Minturno, Minturno.
Yes.
And that's where I spent the months from February to May. I was sent up as part of the advance party. You have an advance party that goes up whenever you're moving a division into the line, and they send a number of people up there. And the job of the advance party is to learn where all the our defense, our positions are. And we were relieving the British South African 5th Armored Division.
Okay, how about that?
Now, I said to the guy when I met the guy that was going to be my chauffeur, let's say, out there, and I said, how long have you been in the Army? Only 6 years or something like that. I said, well, how long has it been since you've been home? He said, 5 years. But this meant nothing. The British fought for centuries,
Yes.
And of course they colonialized, and he was from South Africa. His division was organized in South Africa and sent to fight in Italy. But he taught me a lot. He showed me all around the area. The main thing he taught me was to recognize every single German weapon that was used. You could hear the machine guns. He'd say, "That's our machine gun. That's a German machine gun." And then some shells were there, and he said, "That's a German heavy mortar. That's our light mortar. Or that's this artillery shell. That's an 88. That's their 170. These are sizes of shell." And he taught me all that, which really comes in handy.
Well, I should say so. My goodness, I should say. Now you have in your hand there, you have something of very interesting.
Yes, these are called detonators. They're used on mines to set off a mine. Now they're all German detonators. 3 of them are made of metal. The 4th one is made primarily out of bakelite, which is a German plastic invented by the Germans. Everything nowadays is plastic. This hard plastic was invented by the Germans and used specifically for a type of mine. These 2 big ones are anti-tank mine detonators. They're buried underground, and they can be. There's 2 types of mine detonators. One is a pressure, where if that takes weight to set it off. You have to be, a tank or a truck goes over that, it sets that off. But in addition to each, there's holes in these mines, the anti-tank mines. There's one on the top where this big detonator goes. There's one on the side, and there's one underneath. Now these detonators would be used on the side of the mine or underneath, because these are called pull detonators. If I take this pin out of here and pull this, you'll hear a snap inside. Well, that sets off a little firing cap that's in here. See that little pointed thing? That springs out. It hits this firing cap, which is like a cap that you put in a cap gun. It makes a spark. That spark goes into here, and there's a detonator, which is about a 2-inch long little cylindrical thing that goes over here. That detonator, the firing cap detonates that little powder inside. That sets off the other firing cap, or the other detonator charge. That detonates the explosive in the whole mine. It all happens in a split second. But so these are called pull detonators.
Now, were they sticking up above the surface of the ground? Were they recognizable, or?
They could be. Now, I'll tell you about the different types of mines.
Yeah.
As I said, we had anti-tank mines, and the other type is anti-personnel mines.
Oh, yes.
And these also were used on anti-personnel mines. The worst mine that you encounter is what they call an S mine, or a bouncing Betty, because that's set off by either pull or pressure. There's 2 different kinds of detonator. I don't have a pressure detonator with me, but this would go into the top of the anti-personnel mines. And the one that they used 99% of the time was the bouncing Betty. It was a cylindrical mine about that long and about this big around. And the top of it was the detonator, and the detonators, they could use either something flat that you would step on, or some of them had 3 prongs, and those were what they put on most of them, because if you hit it at any angle, you were likely to set the mine off. Now when you set that mine off, in the middle of that mine was a trail of gunpowder. And when you set the mine and that detonator goes off, it travels down to the bottom of the mine where they have a charge of dynamite down there. These are not big quantities of things, just enough to explode and lift that mine about 6 feet in the air. When a mine gets up 6 feet in the air, meanwhile there's a little trail of gunpowder going on inside there. When that mine gets up in the air, it explodes. Which means that anywhere you are within like 50 yards of that mine, if you're upright, you're going to get hit by some shrapnel. The outside casing of the mine, there's a metal casing outside, there's a metal casing inside about this big around. In between those two is ball bearings, pieces of jagged steel, any scrap metal they could find that would damage you.
Terrible stuff.
And many people, I read one fellow who stepped on one that blew his body in half. His top of his body fell backward one place. His legs took 3 more steps, and his legs collapsed.
Oh.
Can you imagine that? But that's what was their favorite mine.
Yeah.
Now, the only way you stop a mine from going off, see this little paper cut here.
Yeah.
That goes through a little hole on this side, and a little hole comes out the little hole on that side. Now these mines come from the German factories with a pin in there,
yes,
like a cotter pin. The last thing they do after the mine is set and they're ready to go to the next position, second last thing they do is pull that paper clip out of that thing out of there, which will enable this to be pressed down or pulled up in this case. But I should have said that's the second last thing they do. Last thing they do after they've done that, they turn this top a little bit, which blocks that hole. Now I put this paper clip in there last night, and it took me a couple of minutes to maneuver this thing around to line up that little hole inside so I could put this paper clip in. If I'm out there at night, you can imagine what this is like.
Wow.
And everything is done at night. It has to be because...
Of course.
Yeah. So they intentionally turn this so that make it harder for you to think. The way mine sweeping goes on is you wait till it's dark. As I say, we're on this side of the hill, they're on that side of the hill, the mines are down in there. So you start out with your minesweeper, which is they haven't changed too much, the minesweeper. You see metal detectors, that's what, it's basically an old metal detector. You go out and creep out now. Everybody thinks you just walk out there and look for a mine, you see a mine over here. Okay, we'll disable that. You don't even walk, you must, because these mines can be set off different ways.
Very sensitive.
They'll put a wire cord from one mine to another mine or to a tree or anything, any stable one, to put a peg in the ground, you know. That's called a tripwire. And if you put pressure on that tripwire, you hit it with your leg, it's going to set that mine off. So, which is a bouncing Betty. And so before you can even use that mine detector, you've got to reach your arm out, very slowly draw it back to see if there's a tripwire. Mm-hmm. This is all dark. You're on your belly crawling around. They gave you a carbine to defend yourself, which half of us didn't take because it got in the way of sweeping the mines. It's going to fall off your shoulder and everything else.
Right. So
we basically go out unarmed. And then if you find that tripwire, then you've got to cut that first, you know. If you don't find a tripwire, then you take your mine detector and you sweep out in front of you very slowly so you don't hit another tripwire or anything, you know. If you go over a mine, or what you think is a mine, and you stop and you get down and start probing. Now, remember, these are battlefields. That territory, you drove the Germans back onto that hill, and you occupied this hill. That means that whole area around there has been shelled, it's been bullets fired, there's more pieces of metal down there than you can imagine. So you've got to determine from the response of your mine detector whether you run into a mine or just another piece of shrapnel or metal, you know. If you have and you find the mine, then the idea is to get to the detonator and twist this around until you can line those holes up. And then once you put that, we carried a similar, like a cotter pin, put that back in. And once we do that, that mine is safe, unless somebody comes around and pulls it off.
Right.
But this is all done at night. Make matters worse, you're out there trying to keep them from knowing you're out there. Then, about every 15 minutes, the Germans shoot off a flare. They have a flare pistol.
To illuminate the area.
Yeah, illuminates the whole area. Now, fortunately, when they shoot that off, you hear a pop, just a pop from the flare gun. When you hear that pop, you know that about 5 seconds later, it's going to go up in the air, and the parachute is going to open, and it's going to float down very slowly. It takes about 15 minutes for it to get down to the ground. So, when you hear that pop, you don't move a muscle, and that's the hardest point, because your instinct tells you when you hear that pop at that flare, you know a flare is coming. Get down on the ground so they don't see you. By the time you move down on the ground, it's already illuminated, and they're going to see movement. All they want to see is movement, and they know somebody's out there. When you see if they see that movement, the machine guns and riflemen, they all open up. Artillery starts coming, mortar shells start landing, everything. They know you're out there sweeping mines, So that's to be avoided at all costs.
Very, very
They told us when you're sweeping mines, when you hear that pop from the flare gun, you look like a tree. You're going like this. You're kind of halfway stooping over, just above ground level, holding it, and you get out like this and you hear the pop. That's what you just stay like that.
You freeze.
You just stay like that till that flare goes out.
Right.
Because if you try to move, they're going to see the movement.
notice right
That's
away.
what you're looking for is movement.
Right. Well, now, did you have artillery to back you up?
Oh yeah.
You had artillery.
But that doesn't help in that situation.
Not in that situation.
No, if the Germans open up, they'll open up too. But
I mean, as you move north, as the division moved north.
Oh yeah. Every division also has. Each battalion is assigned an artillery brigade.
Right.
And the artillery that's assigned to the infantry is your 75 millimeter guns and 105 millimeter guns, right. Those two. Then there's one artillery outfit that has 200, they have 150 and 240 millimeter guns. They call them big tubs, or 240 millimeters. Now, 75 millimeters is about 3 inches, so you're talking about an 8-inch shell. That's what they fire in these 240 millimeter guns. And they're not actually the longest range, but they're the biggest explosive.
Very effective, I should say.
We have, and each regiment has one of those, or each battalion has one of those attached to. No, I'm sorry, that's a regimental thing. Okay. There's only one in the division, that heavy artillery thing, and they go where they think they're needed most. Right, right. Now on what we call our D-Day was May the 11th, when we lined up ready for the offensive. Yes. To break through that line at Casino there. There was a battery of 6 of these guns. So I was on the back side of the hill, where we were supposed to be. The guys in the foxholes are on the front side of that hill, and the shells are coming, answering our shells. Those 6 240 millimeter guns shot over the top of us. We're laying here on the hill, and these things are shooting over the top of us. I couldn't, my ears rang for a week, and I didn't find out till I was home that I got a perforated eardrum.
Is that so?
From that gun blast. Oh, it's a terrific blast out of the 240 millimeter guns, and there's 6 of them, and it's constant. They bombarded for hours.
Has that affected you throughout your life, or did that heal?
I still can't hear it perfectly.
Is that right? Now, were you wounded or anything like that?
If I had known that, that would have itself been a wound.
You could have gotten a Purple Heart for that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. But later on, I was wounded by a German bomber of all things. Towards the end of the war in northern Italy, the Air Force had pretty well destroyed the German Air Force.
Yes.
There was one 2-engine Junkers 88 bomber that would fly over every night just before sunset. We called him Bed Check Charlie. Same plane all the time. And he would just come down and fly over our lines a little bit to the rear, and he'd drop 3 or 4 bombs and then head back to his airfield, which happened to be in Verona, about 20 miles beyond where we were. And he would come over every night and call him Bed Check Charlie. And half the time nobody even shot at him. We didn't have our anti-aircraft artillery, you know. And we wouldn't, some kind of guys would fire a little rifle ammunition at him, but he was a little too high for that. And so he basically went unchecked. Well, damn, one night I'm on my way to, we were in reserve that time, and I'm on my way to the chow line to get something to eat, and got my cup in one hand and my mess kit in the other hand. And I'm walking towards the chow line with everybody else. And then if you don't drop a bomb right between us and where the chow line was, well, a piece of shrapnel hit me in the hand. So I got a Purple Heart.
Wow.
But it wasn't, I went to the aid room and I had them patch it up. It wasn't that deep a cut. And they patched it up for me, and I didn't even report anything or even claim a Purple Heart, you know. Until after the war, when we were ready to come home, they put a point system into effect.
Right.
That they sent you home according to how many points you had. They started off with like 50 points, and then they went to, or no, they went down. They started off like about 80 points, and they went down to 75, 70, and so forth. When I got to 70, I totaled up my points, and I got 67 points. You got 1 point for each month of service, 2 points for each month overseas, and 3 or 5 points for each decoration or award that you'd like, a Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star. There's 5 points for each of those. I ended up, the third group is going home. The point cutoff is 70 points. I've got 67 points. Wait a minute, if I get my Purple Heart that I'm entitled to, I got 72 points. Sure enough, I went and looked up the record where they had it, and I said, I'm entitled to a Purple Heart. The guy said, you sure are? So they put me down for a Purple Heart. I got 72 points, and I start my way home.
Oh, that's...
Next batch didn't come home. That was early November. Next bunch didn't come home until after the first of the year. So I got in a couple months early by means of those 5 points that I had there.
Well, Ray, you know, it's interesting, and a lot of people overlook the fact the liberation of Rome was one of the most very, very desperate and fought for events, and also one of the most important. And ironically, it happened the day before
2 days before D-Day.
Before D-Day in Normandy, and has always been overshadowed in history by that Normandy invasion. And here was this tremendous army moving up the boot of Italy, and against a very determined, dug-in foe, retreating but still strong and very effective. And so many people just don't realize that.
I'll tell you why. Because in May, all the reporters, photographers, magazine photographers, newspaper, they all moved out of Italy and went to England. Sure. They knew that nobody knew the exact date, but they knew that
it was coming.
It was coming.
Yeah.
They all left Italy. Went up there. Those were the only 2 places there was. The only place there was any fighting at the time.
Did you see any of the reporters or photographers?
We had our public relations man
in
our division. He was the closest thing to that. He would write dispatches from time to time and send them to the newspapers. Right. But all the photographers and all the big newspaper reporters, they all...
Where were you finally pulled out?
We were, we started on May the 11th down there, and by June the 4th, we entered Rome. And we're coming up up here.
Yeah.
You mentioned before, up the boot, there's a book entitled Up the Bloody Boot.
Up the Bloody Boot.
Because of all the men that were lost
How
there.
about that?
and we were getting near Rome.
Yes.
So at that time, the guys from over here at Anzio, we had linked up with them.
Yes.
Not our division, but our troops. We were in the 8th Army, and the 2nd Corps of the 8th Army. You have an army, then you have a corps, then you have divisions.
Yes.
So, Mark Clark was, of course, head of the 8th Army, General Mark Clark. He wanted to be the first man in Rome.
Yeah.
He said, the Americans, we're going to be the first ones in Rome. And the rumor is that he had contacted the British 8th Army was on our right. They had the right half of Italy. And the rumor is that he sent him a message that said, if I see a British soldier in Rome before an American, we get there, he said, I'll shoot him. We are going to be the first ones in the room.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the 88th actually turned out to be the first ones in the room.
Isn't that something?
The Germans had declared an open city, which means that they weren't going to defend it.
Right.
Now that,
so it would be
defend
destroyed.
everything south of there, yeah, but they didn't want to destroy. They feared the effect. They could see the war was pinning to an end where they were going to lose. Sure. They didn't want that on their.
Did you see Monte Cassino?
After the war.
After the war.
Not even after. We went back, about 150 of us, on the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Rome.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, 1989, or let's see, 99. 54, yeah, 1999. 94. About 150 of us got together. We were
Wonderful. That must have been.
It was the most, the greatest trip I've ever taken.
Great experience.
And we hired 3 buses. We had 3 bus loads, and they took us anywhere we wanted to go. And they said, we want to go where we fought. And they took us all the way up. Sure. And of course, my wife went with me, and they took us all the way up from Naples to
battlefield tour.
All the way up.
Isn't that
we stopped at some of the places. When we got up to it, my wife said to me, just like you did, how did you get from down there where we started up here? I said, very simple, we walked.
You walked? Boots on the ground.
Yeah. So, but
is there a cemetery, a military cemetery?
Yeah, there are 2 military cemeteries in Italy. One is around Anzio in South Italy.
Where they first went ashore.
Yeah. And the early casualties from our division were buried there.
Oh.
And there's another one up in Florence, Italy, and that's the big one where most of our troops were.
Yes.
So we went back there, and I found some of the graves from some of the people that I was with.
Yes.
And then there were others I would inquire about them, and I'd say, well, you know, I don't see Wissel Cobb's grave here. And I said, I know he was killed around here. And they said, well, if they took the body home, then we send it home. After the war, they gave you 2 years. The family could claim the bodies, and if they claimed it within 2 years, the government would pay for sending that body home to them.
Some of them are reinterred in Arlington and other places.
Yeah. Any place you want. Yeah.
Sure.
And so those that I didn't find, he said, well, they've already been sent home.
Yes.
Who
was your division commander?
We had a couple. General Kendall was the main.
Kendall?
We had one in the United States, but they didn't send him over.
3 minutes? Okay. Well, Ray, this has just been terrific, and I know we could talk hours because I'm a historian and I love to talk about it, and to have the honor of being in your presence and hearing your wonderful, wonderful description of your actions, and your memory is great, and you're able to give us details that we have been not privy to before. And I know that your family is going to enjoy seeing this DVD, and there will be a copy going to the Library of Congress in Washington, and one eventually on record here in the archives, and one for you and your family. And it's very important, you know, because so many fellas and women have gone on to the great reward without telling their stories. And that is sad, because that information is lost forever. You've been very generous. We thank you for your time and your spirit. It's just a great honor for me to meet you, and Wish you well and long life.
Well, I thank you and Dennis both for
Absolutely.
the opportunity to do this.
Okay,
Something
great.
I
Thank you so
look
much.
forward to.